But I suppose you also, it's that process of working out. You talk about trusted editors, whose views you trust. It's a bit like I suppose in the past when I've been to writers groups and things where you quickly work out whose criticisms you will take on board and whose you won't, or who are coming from the same angle that you are and who aren't, and because otherwise that could get very confusing, couldn't it? If you've got 2 or 3 people helping you who are all coming up with completely different views as to what's good and bad and what should be kept and what should be changed. So yeah, I suppose you have to form that view of whose views you listen to and whose views you trust, I suppose, don't you?
Do you when you are performing, Stephen, does that inform what you end up putting to paper? Is it entirely the other way around? Is it kind of written and you go and say it and that's it, or do you use that feedback loop when you're writing?
To a degree. I mean, as I say, what I write are just like these very short things that are supposed to be funny, and I suppose if nobody ever laughed at them, I'd probably stop. Probably wouldn't perform that. No matter how brilliant I thought it was, I think if clearly nobody was liking it, I probably wouldn't bother performing that one again. But I would probably just do a terrible drawing to accompany it and try and stick it in a book somewhere, or shove it on Facebook accompanied by a terrible drawing to see if people will like the terrible drawing. But yes, I suppose, as I say, since they're basically supposed to be funny, that's a fairly straightforward editorial process.
I was thinking you're almost a bit like a stand-up comedian in that way, Stephen. That like you're kind of constantly trying your material out on your audience, and you've got to be how about these like really quick.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because when I first wrote them, I mean they were written within sort of literary contexts, sort of like writers groups and stuff, and it was an exercise in a writers group, try and write a story in 50 words. So I wrote one, and people laughed. So I thought, oh, I'll write a few more of those. But I did have a period of performing them in comedy clubs, and but not for very long. It's not my natural habitat. They do go down an awful lot. But I feel much more comfortable performing them in a sort of poetry night setting or a kind of variety setting. I host a monthly open floor thing in Musselburgh where people could do songs and poems and stories and stuff, and I quite like doing them in that context, or in a poetry night context. But comedy clubs didn't suit me so much. I don't think their 50-word stories went down okay in the middle of a bill, not so well at the start or the end. But also there was a whole gladiatorial atmosphere to comedy clubs that didn't suit me at all. It's not it's not my cup of tea. So although they're supposed to be funny, I prefer not to perform them in a sort of strictly comedy kind of setting. I think they're quite good as a variety of something else that's happening that night, that kind of thing. But yeah, you're right. It's kind of, I suppose I envision them as a sort of a variant on comedy, like an interesting, different way of doing something comic, but not stand-up comedy. If you see what I mean.
How do you tell when you're writing them that they're funny? Like, because comedy is so difficult to write, isn't it? Partly because it's so subjective. Like, do you have any tips or tricks of what you figured out as to like where you find your comedy, or how you get that comic moment?
It's usually just some idea that occurred to me, whether it's sometimes it will be a memory of something that happened, or something somebody said, or something I've observed and witnessed as I'm walking along or sitting on the bus or whatever, or it might be just some surreal idea that's come to me, just some sort of daft little surreal, often involving talking animals, that kind of thing, some sort of daft idea that occurred to me. And how do I decide whether it's funny? Purely whether it makes me internally laugh, probably not out loud, but purely if I think it's funny myself, and then hope somebody else will. So that's about it, really. Yeah.
Are you writing it more for your own enjoyment, to sort of get something out, or for the joy of creating, or do you feel it's more motivated by the audience and the kind of hitting the result of making them laugh?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's funny. I mean, I suppose a lot of my influences growing up were kind of comedy influences, really, you know, and even though I've never envisioned myself as a comedian as such, but so I suppose I do write them. It's hard to, yeah, I think it's just the process of it's something that amuses me, and an idea occurs to me to write down something that amuses me, and then hopefully it'll amuse other people, you know. So I suppose it has to amuse me first, and if it amuses other people, that's great. I'm not sure I can be more complex than that, really, I suppose. But
what about you, Daniel, with the same question? How would you answer your own question?
Oh, that's tricky.
Maybe not the laughing bit, but the, you know.
Yeah.
What motivates you, I suppose?
I think first and foremost, it's you get this idea, and if you don't express it or get it out into some form, whether it's telling that story you've heard or creating that novel that you've had the idea for, it just kind of gives you a tummy ache. You got it in, and it needs to come out. So I just have that urge, and I remember asking myself a while ago, when I've been writing like the same thing for 7 years and not managing to finish it, and having some serious existential trauma. Say you knew for certain that no one is ever going to read anything you wrote for the rest of your life. Would you still do this? No, seriously, would you still do this? I really thought about it, and yes, definitely, I would still do this for the rest of my life. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah.
What about you, Philippa? What's motivated you to write?
Yeah, I think in a similar way, I think it's kind of that there's something I'm trying to explore for myself, a bit like you were saying, Stephen, you know, it makes you laugh first and then you hope others laugh. And Daniel, you're saying that even if nobody ever read it, you would still need to write it. And I think, yeah, like, I think it's always nice to have people read what you've written, because it kind of makes it feel like it's more real and it's more, you know, it's got something more purpose in the world. But I think most of us have all got pieces that probably no one will have ever read. So because for whatever reason, so, and we still wrote them. So I think, yeah, I think writing has just been the thing that helps me explore the world for myself, or express things that I'm curious about the world. And that's the medium in which I do it. Other people, it might be, yeah, painting or music or whatever. And for me, it's writing. And yeah, I think that now I've found writing, I think that I probably will always write. Yeah, well, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Do you see yourself moving into different genres at all?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that I'll have a fairly long career, so I'm sure that the genre will change a little bit. But I think I'll always probably write at heart, kind of, hopefully something that has a good page turning quality, but allows me to explore things about the human condition. And what genre that happens to fall into, that will depend a little bit on the market. You know, at the moment I get marketed as a psychological thriller, but to be honest, that's not what hooks me. I'm interested in relationships and people, and that can come under lots of different genres, really. So yeah. What about you, Daniel? Have you got are you interested in writing in other genres other than sort of the myths and the fantasy, or is that really kind of where you feel at home?
It's where I feel at home, but I would like to expand that as much as possible. Like I like fantasy horror, and I would really like to write something. I would like to write horror at some point. I would like to write literary fiction at some point, just because I'd like to see what happens when I'm not allowed anything fantastical. I think that would be really interesting. But it's definitely home ground, and I think I want to just keep adding to my world. Like I have ideas for histories within my history, and so when I want to go into the future within this world, I want to just keep building it.
I think, like with Philippa, I was really interested when you were talking about the psychology side of things, because I've seen that you were a psychologist, and I kind of get the feeling from what you're saying that probably the love of writing or the interest in reading and writing came first, and then bringing your interest in psychology into it sort of happens, as opposed to sitting down saying, right, I'm going to write a book in which I'm going to bring my interest and experience in psychology into it. It more evolved from loving reading and wanting to write, and then the psychology happens, in a sense, comes into it. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I think I see kind of my career in psychology and my writing as kind of two results of my fundamental interest in people. So I was interested in studying psychology and working in psychology because I wanted to understand what makes people tick, like what makes people do what they do. And then when I discovered writing, which is, I suppose, in some ways fairly recent, like I say, it's probably been the last 10 years. It's not been something that I've really done my whole life. It was kind of like, this is a way that I can explore my questions about people and their relationships and their choices. And it's quite handy that I've studied quite a lot of psychology stuff. I can make use of that. So yeah, I think they're two kind of expressions of the same core interest for me, which is people, just people, and what makes us so weird, basically.
Yeah, because I had wondered to what degree it might be something that you saw as separate. I'm a psychologist of my day job, and this is what I do to, fly off in completely different directions whatsoever. But I suppose there's inevitably going to be a meeting point, I suppose, isn't there, really?
Do you find that your work in mental health is, working so closely with people in all their brilliant colourfulness, does that inform your writing?
It has done. I did quite a long time ago write. It probably sounds a bit unethical. I don't know. I did write a lot of monologues based on people I'd been a support worker for years ago, in a way that I was never quite sure how ethical it was. But on the other hand, I kind of felt that they were sort of stories that weren't being heard in many ways. That experiences people were going through that weren't widely heard. They're possibly slightly more now in terms of mental health being discussed more than it was maybe. I mean, I was probably writing these sort of 20 years ago or so, and there's maybe more awareness to a degree, but maybe not. There's more awareness in terms of things like depression and anxiety and so forth. But I think in terms of the more sort of really deep-rooted chronic mental health problems that people have been living with for decades, which people with schizophrenia and so forth, that it wasn't really being. These were stories that weren't being heard and were often being very much misportrayed as well. And so, on the one hand, I was writing these things, wondering about the ethics of it, and on the other hand, thinking that it would be good. These are viewpoints and experiences that very seldom get seen and heard and put out there. So that certainly did. There was a phase where my mental health work wasn't influencing what I'm writing a lot. Maybe not so much now. I maybe started to get a bit uncomfortable with the fact that I was doing that at one point, and maybe also felt I'd written a lot of the strongest stuff I could write on that. So I don't do that so much now. But I still think, it's still a subject that moves me very deeply, which is why I've worked in it for donkey's years. But I perhaps don't directly write so much about it now as I did once upon a time. But it's bound to influence my outlook on life. I think the fact that I've been doing this for so long. But I was wondering, just as a completely different questions. I've seen with Daniel, you use a lot of music as well, don't you, in terms of how you tell stories and stuff. And I suppose one thing I'd be wondering about that is how international that is as a method accompanying storytelling to use music, and also it showed me that as you're telling stories all around the world, whether there would be language barriers sometimes with telling stories, and whether music can help in overcoming language barriers in accompanying stories. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just things that are coming to me.
I feel like I don't have a encyclopedic enough knowledge of storytelling and music to give a really full answer to that. But in my experience, music and storytelling seem to be intimately connected everywhere you go. Certainly, where I've been, a lot of storytellers are also musicians, and I think in a lot of settings where stories would have been told in previous generations or traditional cultures, there was no separation of storytelling as a thing. Tom Muir, this wonderful storyteller I know up from Orkney, said, people wouldn't say, right guys, we're going to have a storytelling tonight, and our tonight's theme is seal people. People would just be sat around, like the fishermen would be sat in their huts smoking their pipes, and someone would say, do you remember old Duncan? He was a funny fellow, wasn't he? And the stories would start to flow, and someone would have their fiddle with them, and they'd start playing the fiddle. And so there wasn't this separation. And I will usually alternate stories and music. So I'll usually introduce a set with some didgeridoo, and then throughout the set I'll maybe use didgeridoo some more, or some flute or singing bowls and things, and then I'll try and weave together a soundscape with the story without using it for illustration. Like, you don't want to be like, and then it rains like shh, and then thunder, drum, bang, because that's just bad. People will have different ways of doing it. Some storytellers, I know a storyteller, a couple who use drum really effectively. The whole time they're going to dum da dum da 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 dum, they're talking right da dum da dum da 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 dum, and that pulls you into this trance. And it's really powerful. What else do people use? So I've a storyteller I know who plays the harp, this Chinese harp, where it's kind of like laid out on a tight table, and they're sort of doing strings like this. I don't know what that's called. And she'll play that and play these trancey rhythms. It's absolutely amazing. So yeah, there's no end of ways in which people can use music, and I think people will use it wherever they can, really.
Yeah. I mean, do you have to? Have you found you've had to adapt the way you tell? If you're performing in different parts of the world, because I know you're performing internationally, do you have to adapt how you tell the stories to a degree in a different country or a different place?
Most places I've been, it's been with audiences who speak or predominantly speak English, so I've been able to do it just as I normally would, but perhaps be careful to use simpler language. Like I was in Singapore last year, advice was like, everyone speaks English, good English, but maybe fairly simple. And other places, like I was in Turkey, I had a couple of translators, so I would just say a line, and they would say the line, and we go back and forth. That was interesting. I think it was a long time ago actually, so I can't really remember much how that process went for me. But I've seen other storytellers work with translators. We have an international festival in Edinburgh every year, and we have storytellers from all over the world, and quite often it's quite duolingual. And I've seen it done incredibly well, where the two become like a unit, and you're saying afterwards that would have been worse if it was just you. It was better with the translator, because there's a dynamic between the two of them. There's this extra energy, and there's a humor in the translation of someone just being like, and then he fell down, and she goes, oh sorry, and you get these little moments like that. And then I've also seen it done badly, where they're separate from each other, and the translator's over here and the person telling the stories over here, and it's like which is awful. So generally, I've been able to just kind of do it as is so far.
Yes. It's the sad good fortune of having English as your first language, isn't it? I suppose.
It's been really lovely putting faces to names, and hearing you all speak about what you do has been so fascinating, and I'm really excited to share it with the festival. So thank you so much for doing it. We really, really appreciate it. I know everyone's got a whole lot juggled despite being stuck at home at the moment. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time